Hi everyone, welcome back to another exciting comics loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. And I'm also saying welcome back to my guest on this episode. Delighted to be having a second chat, actually, technically a third chat because we've also met in person. Trevor Mueller, thank you for jumping in and being willing to talk with me.
Yeah, Jason, thanks so much for having me back, and especially so soon. I feel like we do too many of these, and you're going to get sick of me. So,
Not at all, not at all. It's an open invitation. You're welcome anytime. Do you want to set up a weekly?
yeah, okay, let's
All
let's
right,
do
yep, yep,
it.
let's do it. So I can confirm that you are a person that exists outside of Zoom. We met this summer at Heroes Con in Charlotte,
Mhm.
and one of the things that I learned about you through that interaction is that in addition to all ages comics and graphic novels, you really have a range. I actually got your sampler pack, I believe is what you were calling it,
Mhm.
where there were like four or five different stories of different genres from science fiction to horror. And so just sending appreciation because I love reading work that travels across genres and forms and age groups that way.
Yeah, honestly, my goal is to have something for everyone on my table at a convention at some
Mm-hmm.
point in the future. And the first question I usually ask people when they come to my table is, what do you like to read? And I'll start to list genres. And there are genres that I don't have on my table yet. Like I don't have a high fantasy book. I've got urban
Mm-hmm.
fantasy, but I don't have high fantasy. I don't have romance yet. And then my offerings in science fiction tend to lean towards younger readers or teens. I don't have like hard adult science fiction out just yet. And so for me, one, I have ADD, and so it becomes something easy for me to kind of sit there and jump and fixate and focus on those particular genres when I'm writing that story, and then I can
Mm-hmm.
move on to a different genre or a different story for different age groups as I'm working on projects. And I enjoy doing that because I think it keeps me very versatile, and I think it keeps me very nimble when it comes to my narrative, when it comes to my story structure, when it comes to the types of stories I like to tell. But two, and again, at the end of the day, I'm often a guest at conventions that I go to, and my mission as a guest is always just to make sure that people have the best time that they possibly can at that convention. And
Mm-hmm.
if that means that I can have something on my table that they will enjoy reading, that is kind of the goal. That is the point in the distance that I am aiming for and continue to try to go for. And so right now, a lot of those exist in the kind of that single issue sampler pack, but we're starting to see some of the projects that I've been working on for the last 4 or 5 years or so coming out. Now that I mean, they've been done. Like I've been sitting on a handful of them, and I was just a little trigger shy to kind of get them out into the world, just knowing how much work goes into doing crowdfunding or doing order fulfillment or doing working with a printer and trying to get an actual physical copy made. And so now I'm starting to get that energy and that confidence back up with some of the Kickstarter and Zoop campaigns that I've been doing and those things. So this is a long-winded way of kind of saying expect more of the same, and more of the same means a variety of stories because that's what I love to do. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I want to make sure that there's always a book on my table that someone is going to love.
Yeah, yeah. I enjoy and appreciate that because I like more of the same sometimes, but I also like when folks try new things. So
Mhm.
excited that you mentioned romance, not necessarily because I'm a romance reader, but a lot of creators that I've talked with are talking about like, oh, I want to do a romance comic. And of course, going back decades, that's one of the things that used to be more widely available in comics were romances. So excited that that's something that you're thinking about as well. It sounds like you like to challenge yourself.
I do. And for me too, it's always finding what's my voice within a particular genre.
Hmm.
Um, with romance, for the longest time, I did not have a story to tell. I had artists that were interested in doing romance or who had done romance stories before, and they were like, "Hey, if you ever want to pitch me a romance story, like, please do." And so I I can't spoil it and talk at length about what it is the story is because it doesn't exist yet and nobody's greenlit it yet, and I haven't decided to suck it up and self-publish the thing yet. But I was like, what is my take on romance? Because my experience in romance in life was not very exciting. It was not very dramatic. It was very boring. It was often not successful. And seeing another story about some guy pining over the lost love that got away or those things just didn't feel right to me. Like, that's not the kind
Hmm.
of story I wanted to tell. I like proactive characters that have motivations and missions and things to do outside of a relationship. And I think that makes those characters a lot more interesting. So I had pitched an idea to my repossessed artist, Yishan Lee, to see if we would potentially pitch this on Webtoon because romance is quite popular on the Webtoon platform.
Hmm.
It's arguably their most popular genre that they have on there. But as somebody who does not have experience reading romance or watching a lot of romance movies or those things, like my take on it, I think was probably going to be a little outside of the norm.
Yeah.
And Yishan found it very refreshing, and we're just waiting to hear back to see does Webtoon also find it refreshing, and does that work in our favor, or do they want to see something that's a little bit more standard, a little bit more romance-y with some of the tropes and those things. So we'll see. We'll see what they come back with. But in theory, a romance story has been identified, and again, I thought it was very out there and something that Yishan would never in a million years want to do. And she was like, "That's the reason I want to do it, is because I haven't seen something like this in romance before."
Yeah, yeah. Now, if I'm thinking of the right book, Repossessed, I remember reading it, and there's a very interesting thing that happens at the end of that story, pulling on some of the horror elements. Am I thinking of the right one?
Well, Repossessed has not ended just yet.
Oh,
It's
okay.
updating on Webtoon every Tuesday, and the final episode will go up for free Halloween week.
Nice.
Fast Pass users right now, as of this recording, are able to get to the second to last episode of the series. But there's a bit of a love triangle, or I like to call it a love decadohedron going on
Hmm.
within that
Hmm.
series. Um, because I originally wrote Repossessed. Quick background for people who don't know, like, so Repossessed is a Webtoon original series about college kids that work at a pawn shop that sells demonically possessed items,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's kind of a love letter to 1970s, 80s, maybe early 90s era horror films, embracing the cheesy and the campy nature that those movies have by today's standards. Like, that's what we were going for. I mean, we have a
Yeah.
man-eating toilet in the first episode. It's silly by design. And I had not in the original pitch included like a romance or a romantic triangle or any of those things in it. And the editors, as the story was progressing, they were like, needs more romance. Like, we want, like, our readers like and crave romance. We need more shipping in there. We need more will they, won't they. We need this. And so this will they, won't they kind of dynamic came up between the two main characters, Troy Richardson, who's a college student who has lost his job, and his best friend Mari, who works at this demonic, this creepy kind of pawn shop, and she like helps him to get this job, and they work together, solving supernatural dilemmas that they have to do around town, and ultimately trying to save the world from an evil organization. And and so they wanted like a lot of romantic tension between these two, even though I had never pitched it that way. They were just BFFs who eventually became roommates who saved the world together. And so then, like, we introduced another character who was the popular girl in school, who also works at the pawn shop, but now she's kind of socially aloof and doesn't talk to people, and her name is Cheryl. And in episode 25, 26, or something like that of the series, we reveal why she's so socially aloof, and there's something more to her. Again, I like layered, interesting, unique characters. And so her secret kind of comes to light, and the dynamic shifts between Troy and Mari quite a lot. And so the editors also were like, hey, need romance, like, want romance. Let's put a love triangle in there. And romance, again, was never part of the pitch. It was never part of the series. And I was getting a little frustrated with some of the direction. And I was
Hmm.
like, well, why don't we just have every character love Troy romantically? And I said it as a joke, like venting frustration. Like, why don't we just turn it into a harem comic? Everyone just, loves Troy and wants to date him. And they were like, brilliant. We love it. Let's make it happen. And so suddenly was like, okay, backed myself into a corner here. And so we started throwing in more and more of these like weird, like love interest moments where, Troy's dating somebody new, and then like the two girls who kind of have interest in him are like, why has this happened? So we have a lot of fun with it, but and but romance is not the focus of that series, and it was never intended to be the focus of that series. We just kind of pepper it in every now and then to keep the editors happy because they pay the bills.
Yeah, yeah. So the moral of the story is, at least in part, talking to an editor is like talking to a genie. You have to be careful what you say. Like, oh, you do want that. Oh, okay.
I, you know, I learned that sarcasm does not translate through email.
All right, right. Yeah.
and and sometimes my more direct approach of communicating, because when I write emails and stuff, I'm very direct. I don't want anyone to ever get confused about what I'm saying. um and so I don't think that that helps the humor I was trying to inject in there. Probably needed a little winky face or something at the end of that
Yeah,
email,
yeah.
and I did not.
Now you mentioned kickstarting and crowdfunding and things like that, and I'm always
Mhm.
impressed with like zooming with people that do those things because sometimes their background kind of looks like a warehouse, and it's like, there's a business side to it, there's a busyness to it, and so in addition to creating, you're promoting, you're shipping, you're doing a lot of things. Are you currently engaged in that work on any of the titles that you're putting out into the world?
Yeah, so I have an online store and I'm doing fulfillment all the time as orders are kind of coming in. My biggest challenge is inventory management, because I have two crawl spaces in my basement, and the you got to be very careful about storing books in a basement because of humidity and all those things. You don't want paper and humidity don't go well together. And so I've got to store those books very, very carefully to make sure that they don't get any kind of damage or warping
Mhm.
to them, which they don't. They're all sealed in plastic and they're really, really well taken care of. But I have a literal ton of Albert the Alien in my crawl space. Between four volumes, I have well over 2,000 pounds of
Wow.
Albert the Alien. And over the summer, the last time we spoke on Zoom, I was doing a Zoop campaign for Los Ojos, which is going to be a 132-page hardcover book. That campaign was successful. It happened. The printer is in the process of printing, or I guess the book has been printed as of the last update that I got, and they are packaging it up and putting it on the boat to start shipping it over here. So it should be arriving at my house sometime in November, December, and it is another 2,300 pounds
Mm.
of books.
Wow.
And so, so suddenly I have another ton of books that I have to make room for in a basement that does not have room for that many books. And now with the current Kickstarter that I'm doing with Demon City, once
Hmm.
again, I'll run into a similar issue because I'm going to order the same amount. Like I like to order a certain amount because I get price discounts when you order a certain amount of books. And I go to
Hmm.
events throughout the year where I can sell them and give them to people, and I can gauge how much I'm going to move within a given year. And with older series like Albert the Alien, who cater to a young readers type of audience, like those books are becoming, I would say, the industry shifting a bit. So selling them has changed in terms of projections a bit because that
Mm.
that age group is now into things like One Piece or Pokemon or other things that don't quite match the visual aesthetic that we were going for Albert, where that was more inspired by like 1980s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Mighty Max or the types of shows that I grew up watching as Saturday morning cartoons. Now everyone wants anime, they want manga, they want something that's a little bit more exciting, a little bit older, even though it's for a younger reader. And so those projections have changed a little bit in the coming years. But with Los Ojos and Demon City, I mean, just based on how well those were selling as single issue floppies that I printed a limited edition of just to try to test them out, or selling them in the packs like the one that you got over at Heroes Con, where it's the sampler pack. Like
Hmm.
those were my most popular titles. And so I know that I will be able to go through them, but at one point I will have overlapping inventory in my basement with both of these books. And
Yeah.
that's going to be a really interesting experience to try to figure out how to coordinate. Um, and continue the protections and things that I keep around my books to make sure that they don't get humidity issues or any of those things. So, um, long answer to a short question. I'm not doing the fulfillment on those books yet because I haven't received them yet, but I will be doing those within the first 2 weeks. As soon as I get them in, we'll start putting together the assembly line and putting those out because each Los Ojos probably had just shy of 200 backers or so. So it wasn't terrible to put those orders together, and a chunk of those were actually digital only, which I was surprised by when I got it. I heard people love to read on their Kindles, so
Hmm.
now they can, and that's why we make digital copies available. With Demon City, though, as I'm seeing the orders trickling in, we're not even at the end of week one yet, and we're already only $300 away from being fully funded,
Wow.
which
Wow.
is incredible. I never in my wildest dreams did I think that we would get funded that quickly, which shows you how popular the title is. And the orders that I'm getting in seem to be the physical copy of the book. That's really what people want. And again, that'll help to move a lot of those copies that will be coming in from the printer once we
Mm-hmm.
get those in. So the goal right now is again to finish the campaign for Demon City, which will end October 31st at 6 p.m. Central Time. I know because I set that up, and so a spooky book for a spooky season. And then as
Perfect.
soon as that is done, the files go off to the printer, and then they take about 3 to 4 months to do the printing, the compiling, the shipping. They got to get through customs, and then they get it over into my door. And then once that happens, 1 to 2 weeks later, they'll start getting out to the backers. So that gives
Oh,
me at least a little bit of a break because I'll be able to kind of put the assembly line together for Los Ojos, which will be coming in at the end of the year, and then we'll be getting Demon City in later at the end of the year slash early next year, depending on how quickly they get the files.
nice, nice. Yeah, I remember reading Demon City as part of the sampler pack. Is there a particular tagline, sort of an elevator pitch that you would want to share with listeners that might not be familiar with it yet?
Sure. So Demon City is a mature reader's crime noir buddy cop supernatural story. Uh, it takes place after the apocalypse has happened. For 30 minutes, demons from hell have spewed out into our world, and then all of a sudden it stops, and now they're stuck here. It's a premature apocalypse. I'm told it happens to everybody.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
3 years after that event, the demons now live among us as citizens. The cops are overwhelmed. They can't keep up. Demons are stronger, faster, better. They have different weapons, different drugs, and we can't keep up with them. And so Detective Sheila Garcia has to take on a brand new partner, Horace Nightingale. Horace Nightingale is the first demon detective. And the first case that they catch together is the last homicide that will ever happen because somebody has murdered death and now no one else can die.
Hmm.
So
Nice.
his first case is putting them out of a job. And I thought that that was a fun and interesting situation to kind of put these characters in. And with Sheila, like with any buddy cop story, right? You need kind of opposites that attract with each other. They bicker like an old married couple, but when it matters most, they come together for a unified front. And I've always liked that about buddy cop stories, right? When you're looking at like Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, Bad Boys, any of those types of stories, Rush Hour,
Mm-hmm.
you get that fun banter, this fun adventure, and then again the characters coming together when they need to do so the most. Alien Nation was a big influence on me as well. Rakinis O'Brien, if you ever watched that, it was a movie and then a TV show way back in the day. I loved that show.
Yeah.
But so
Yeah.
we tried to kind of put that supernatural element into a procedural police detective story. And I liked that world. I liked this idea of like a post-apocalyptic setting that wasn't quite post-apocalyptic. Like it got there and then it stopped. And suddenly like there's this question about, well, why did it start? Why did it stop? Right? If this isn't the end of days, then why? Why did we
Mm-hmm.
have this moment? And then the who done it and why behind the murder, and then also just what is a world like where everyone is suddenly immortal. And so we subtitled the book Hell on Earth because one, you've got demons living among us, but also two, suddenly you have people who are unable to die who maybe it's their time,
Yeah.
or maybe they got into a what should be a fatal accident, and the hospital's like, we don't know what to do. And so it creates this timeline, it creates this sense of urgency for our characters to try to solve this, because things aren't better when
Mm-hmm.
everyone is immortal. Things are worse. And I subscribe to the philosophy of the only thing that makes life precious is the fact that it ends. And if life can't end, then what does that do to us as a society? What does that do to us morally, ethically? And how do our characters deal with those types of situations? So we try to address some of those things behind a fun buddy cop action story set in kind of an urban fantasy setting.
Cool.
So
Cool.
that's the long and short of what Demon City is. And I had reached out to a number of my friends who are big creators out there, people who had either influenced the story because they've written murder mysteries or procedurals or thrillers or those types of books out before. And the response that I got back, and I asked if I could turn them into pull quotes, and I was given permission from 100% of the people out there, but they love it. They love this marriage between kind of a almost Lovecraftian supernatural world
Mm-hmm.
and this police procedural kind of structure.
Yeah.
So that was refreshing. That was something that I appreciated, and I wasn't quite sure if I'd hit gold. And it seems like we've done a good job of creating something that fans really really like.
Yeah, no, well, and as you're talking about that and kind of talking about the turns and how the story unfolds, I'm just curious how you sort of build a story like that, how you think through the different possibilities. Are you a person that like is walking and thinking about this, or are you a journaler? How does a plot come together for you that way?
Demon City took a while because I hadn't written a crime story this integrated before. And for me, I liked the idea of the setup. I liked the idea of kind of a supernatural buddy cop marriage.
Hmm.
But then I needed a crime. Like you need a crime for them to solve. And since they're homicide detectives, it has to be a murder. And so what's the murder that happens that makes things interesting or different or unique?
Hmm.
And I had aligned on the idea of personifying the seven deadly sins or turning the four horsemen of the apocalypse into mob bosses. And some of them made it over and some of them did not during what we call end of days, right? The mini window in which Desians from hell were suddenly thrust up into our world. So some of them made it over and some of them did not. But I was like, and so what do they do here? They kind of become mob bosses. So like Famine kind of becomes like the drug lord, and like Lust owns like a brothel that's like a demon conclave, safe haven kind of a place. Um, Conquest is doing like gladiatorial MMA style fighting and has become a
Hmm.
celebrity and that kind of way. And so Death basically is like this mob boss kind of curator that's overlooking all these different criminal enterprises, and suddenly Death is wiped out. And so if Death's job is about trying to make sure that the mortal eventually sever off this coil, right? Right, like we
Hmm.
move into the afterlife and into the next world. Well, why would somebody kill Death? And what's the motivation behind it? And these questions, while I was going on walks or while I was reflecting on things, started to become very very interesting. And I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
this feels like the first crime that could become a series of things that, if popular enough, like we could turn this into a series, but if not, like we'll at least solve and identify this particular murder within the book. So for me, it started with the characters and then the crime. And then it was trying to figure out like, well, what was the crime and what was the series of events that kind of led up to this, the motivation.
Hmm.
And then what happened as a fallout from that, because we have to think about the supernatural implication of the murder that the characters have to solve.
Nice, nice. It's interesting to hear about, and uh, I think I have the final official question, which is if I'm a listener out there and I want to find out more, if I want to see the all ages material, if I want to see the more mature content, and if I want to support the campaign, where would be some places I might go to do that?
Yeah, so the campaign is available until October 31st on Kickstarter. If you type Demon City into the search bar, it will pop up. It's Demon City Volume 1, Hell on Earth. But if you look for me on social media or on my website, Trevor A. Mueller is me on TikTok, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, Facebook. Find me, follow me, friend me. And then trevoramueller.com, I have a newsletter as well that I work on to come out monthly, although during the campaigns we usually update it a little bit more frequently than that. Just to make people aware if we've unlocked something new. I always try to get my newsletter subscribers like early access to things, early
Mhm.
bird pricing, first access to exclusives or limited editions that we do, that type of stuff. And so joining the newsletter is the easiest way for me to bypass any algorithms to try to get to people. And again, that's available at trevoramueller.com/newsletter. So Trevor A. Mueller, find me, follow me, friend me, is the easiest way to kind of look it up. And again, my social media right now is filled with links to the campaign as well. And on the campaign, we've got a lot of preview pages. So you can see, I want to say I did 7 or 8 pages of samples. So people can kind of see stuff from that first issue. But the first issue that you got, Jason, was in black and white, and
Mhm.
the graphic novel is going to be in color.
Nice,
So you
nice.
can see how those pages translated into finished color. But yeah, it's going to be a 168 page full color deluxe hardcover edition, and it wraps up all 6 issues of the story. And if successful, we will do a volume 2. In fact, we have a reward tier right now where people can get drawn into volume 2, either as a
Nice.
human or a demon character. So yeah, I'm very very excited about the book. We've done extremely well. Again, we're $300 away from our goal as of this recording, and we haven't even hit the first week yet. That doesn't start until Tuesday, and we're recording this on a Sunday. So that's very very exciting for me. And again, anyone who wants to check it out, please do. I also appreciate sharing the link with
Mhm,
people on your
mhm.
social media pages because that helps out considerably. Even if it's not something for you, just sharing the link is something that creators like me really, really need because it helps us get the word out there in front of people who might be interested. So,
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, and you mentioned the art and the black and white, very striking, very memorable. So I imagine the color adds even more. And perfect title to be explored. I love doing interviews in October because it's among my favorite genres. So perfect title for the season.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, and Marco's artwork is very noir-ish. I mean, he loves doing crime
Mhm.
stories. And whenever I start a relate, this is my first project I did with Marco, and I've since done 3 more projects. One of which is actually going to be the Pots and Panels anthology that has not launched on Kickstarter just yet, but it's like over 300 creators attached to this thing. It's an incredible anthology, and I'm happy to talk about that one a little bit as well. But Marco and I partnered up again to do that book because I thought that he would be a perfect fit for it. And then we're working on another project right now that's unannounced. But he has this fantastic crime noir kind of style where he balances light and shadows and blacks and whites very, very, very well. And I really struggled with Demon City as to whether or not I wanted to put it in color because I
Mhm.
really liked how good his black and whites were. And then the grayscale that he added to the convention exclusive preview that you got, again, just really, really enhanced the art that he had there. And he had introduced me to a colorist named Shan Benion, who he had worked with before and really liked how Shan's colors complemented the type of art that he did. So I reached out to Shan and just said, like, you want to do a sample? You want to show me some stuff? Like, let's figure out if we want to work together. And the coloring pages that Shan turned in were just jaw-dropping. Um, Shan was operating at a different level when it came to color theory that I, at the time, did not fully appreciate and have since gone back to Shan and apologized. um, because the first couple of pages you'll remember this from the preview sample, and this is on the Kickstarter page sample, so I'm not spoiling anything. But one of the things that the demons bring into our world are brimstone rounds. So they have these very large demonic looking guns, and they're essentially firing sulfur rounds into police cars and blowing them up, and while they're trying to rob this bank. And Shan had colored all that stuff like with this neon looking yellow
Mhm.
that I didn't necessarily like the first time that I looked at it. And then as I started thinking about it more, I was like, well, it's like crime noir. So you're looking at neon colors, like one, two, there's sulfur rounds, and sulfur is like this bright, bright, almost neon, almost like a highlighter, like
Hmm.
kind of yellow color. And that color started to kind of define what this book was becoming, and the way that some of the demonic elements of like drugs or weapons or those types of things started to pepper into the series. And Shan was using it to color covers and was putting that into like the actual panel pages. And I was like, you're operating at a level that I don't fully appreciate, only because I'm not well enough educated in color theory and those things. And so I was learning so much in my conversations with Shan about color and things. And every time they would tell me about what they were doing or why they were doing a thing or what they thought they should be doing in particular panels, like my mind just I was like,
Nice.
and now I've reached a point with Shan because Shan is also coloring my pots and panels story that was in there. I'm like, whatever you want to do, I trust you to do it. Like we've established that rapport. I know that you are way better at this than I am, and Shan is just going to take that ball, throw it up in the air, knock it out of the park, and it's just going to keep sailing because it's going to be that good.
Yeah, nice, nice. It's good when
Yeah.
a good team assembles. It's a good
Yeah,
thing.
and again, it's all about networking, right? Like I would have never met Shan had Marco not recommended them, and Shan was such an easy person to work with. Cannot recommend Marco or Shan enough on any of your projects, but don't steal them from me from Volume Two because
Sure.
I want them to work on Volume Two of Demon City.
Well, Trevor, I'm always glad to talk with you. Always glad to hear about what is happening in your creative world, and certainly glad to have you back anytime. Glad to share about Demon City and the current projects and those that are on the way. And I'll probably see you at Heroes Con again as well.
Fingers crossed. Yes, I applied. So I would love to come back and see you there. So and thank you again for talking to me, for setting this up, and everyone out there. Thank you so much for checking out the campaign, for following me on social media, for sharing the links, for pledging if you can. Again, it helps indie creators like me immensely. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, many, many thanks, and we shall talk more in the near future.
Sounds good, my friend.